All right, so welcome everybody. Um, this is our 22nd annual senior reading and our first one as a Zoom webinar. So we're glad to be together in this virtual space anyway, and we're really excited about hearing these 8 extraordinary young writers read their work for us tonight. So if you happen to have a copy of the chapbook tonight, we're following this in alphabetical order. And there are 3, if you're from outside of Barry. I'm Dr. Sandy Meek, and I'm the poet at Barry. And we also have Dr. Will Donnelly, who is our fiction professor, and Dr. Clint Peters, who's our creative nonfiction professor. And so we will be introducing our writers tonight. All right. So we're going to start our first writer, who is Timothy Belin. Timothy is a writer from a small Swiss village called Genolier. His creative works cover a wide array of styles and genres, including playwriting, short stories, incomplete novels, and mostly formal poetry. His hope is to write at least one piece for every type of writing imaginable. After graduation, Timothy plans on either becoming a sports journalist or getting the play he wrote produced, possibly both. He also hopes to eventually complete and publish the novel he began for his honors thesis. Please welcome Timothy Belin.
Right, so hello everyone. As mentioned in my intro, I write when I write poetry, it's mostly formal, so I thought I'd start with a sonnet because I felt that would be fitting. So this is called The Feather's Fight. I watch a single feather slowly fly through wisps of air above glistening green, a simple flight beneath a boundless sky, an epic fight that rages though unseen. The winds all push to gain the upper hand as people walk along without a glance at where the missing wing's lone limb might land. They leave its life in the harsh hands of chance. It swirls with swelling speed as gods exhale, its caught in cruel claws it can't control. The plaything of a grim and ghastly gale, it finds no aid to somehow save its soul. Alone in wretched weather with no aim, I see me and the feather are the same. This next one came from a class I took with Dr. Peters this semester, where we visited cemeteries and graveyards. And this is a direct response to doing that. It's called Cities for the Dead. Who fought to build the graves, whose will was it to praise the dead with stone, who planned the city on a hill for naught but ruin, ash, and bone. The men and women buried here by friends or kin were laid to rest. Their plots were planned when death crept near, their headstones built at their behest. But in these one can tell the truth of lonesome souls afraid to die, who fought in death did plant the proof to trick the watchers from on high. They wrote kind words for all to read on shiny slabs that tower wide, to spread their virtue and good deeds with hopes we'd let their faults subside. As arms engraved, they sprout from earth, a wishful bridge to heaven's gates. They wait for hands to yank them north, deliver their desired fate. But no one thought of passing time, who carries with him harsh decay, who fades the names with wet and grime, and makes these rocks all sink someday. No matter width, no matter height, once nature comes with heavy boots, she'll trample victims out of sight and hide the corpse beneath her roots. And even angels, marble meant like hired saints to fairy souls, can only offer faint lament when told they can't fulfill their roles. For costly shrines and flowers bloomed will serve for nothing in the end, as those who dance in dismal gloom have left behind their mortal friends. So why, I ask, these haunted mounds, vast edifice to those we lost, grand sights for blind eyes underground who feed the worms and gather moss. And this next one is in the chapbook for those who have it, and it's not a formal poem. Instead, it's a univocal, which means it only uses one vowel throughout the entire poem, which is the vowel I. It's called Forced Ink. I strip, ditching his short. I ink it in itching skin, its tip stinging, whittling pin pricking in. Illicit sin, I insist. I sit still, gritting, wincing, biting lips till I think, if I list things I might scout it, mind slipping in night. Winning stint. Still, it drills in, sliding inch with inch, gripping tight, spirit sinking, I visit within, risk missing it finish. I flick 6 bills, split. Forced ink disfrills. Wings lifting high in wind, I climb, whistling, I'm king. His mind isn't living, still, twin stick. Binding, I will bring his imprint with. And the next one is once again a formal poem. It was inspired by like sometimes it starts raining really a lot around here, and it almost feels like it's the apocalypse. And it's called Eschaton, which is just another word for the apocalypse. So, Eschaton. You watch as heavens start to cry, though torrid tears descend in scores, from clouds invading once bright skies to paint new shadows cross the shores. You feel the winds from lands unknown that blow away all hopes of life as grounds disposed of fiery stone and cause your incessant strife. It's Mother Nature raising hell to raise the human race with rage. Oft prophesied, here comes the knell of what you thought of's golden age. The oceans rise with famished waves, the mountains vanish in the seas, transforming cities into graves, erasing selfish centuries. Within this wicked plight you stand as all in instants turns to rust, and wonder whether works of man were really only specks of dust. And the last one I'm going to read today is not a formal poem, but it's one of my favorite ones I've written. It's once again in the chapbook. It's called Beneath the Surface. The nightlight draped my room with shadows, dark demons dancing on walls, and I feared the frenzied beasts that hid beneath my bed. So I tipped my head overboard, a sailor searching the sea for fish, and, perched in this precarious position, I checked the dreary depths below for monsters I'd made up. I asked my parents to sprawl like stingrays over ocean floors and illuminate the cavernous recesses to confirm the lack of spirits, but they always wound up whispering the same calming words, claiming the creepers were only in my head. So I'd sleep soundly until they'd crawl once more through my cranial crevices to populate my pitiful world, and my sole comfort came from my conviction none of them were real. My mother's promise became a mantra, my father's soothing claim my faith, repeated till I realized that I'd distorted their statement. They had told me they were in my head. That's it for me.
That was wonderful, Timothy. Thanks so much. As Dr. Meek said earlier, my name is Dr. Will Donnelly, and I'll be introducing our next reader, and that is Ethan S. Carroll. All his life, Ethan S. Carroll has wanted to entertain people, and ever since 8th grade, he knew that authoring his own literature was the way he was going to do it. He is the last bastion of maximalism. He does his best writing when he has Motown blasting in his ears and a Diet Coke within reach. Following graduation, Mr. Carroll intends to crawl into a rocking chair with a good book and not leave until he darn well feels like it. When he does feel like it, he intends to carve out a living as a ghostwriter, assuming, of course, that he doesn't make bank when he publishes his debut novel, whichever comes first, so long as you find his work entertaining. So let's welcome Ethan Carroll.
Thank you for that, Dr. Donnelly. Hello, hi, everyone. Everyone in the back, can you hear me? Good. So the couple of things I wanted to read were not in the chat book. So if you were hoping to read along, cry more, I guess. First thing I have is an excerpt from a fix-up novel I'm working on called Nightmare Files of Arcadia. Chapter 1, Kelly by the Road. The warm Curacao moon was a marked improvement on the hot Curacao sun. Trades off the coast moved the clouds around, maintaining a cool discourse as they haggled over Kelly's hair. And yet, despite all that, Kelly couldn't enjoy the night wind. There was simply too much cadaverous salt coming off the beach. Smells like week old fish and used underwear, they thought, wrinkling their nose. Kelly tracked the bouquet down to the water's edge. A highway of clean sand cut through the litter, leading them to a bloated corpse taking abuse from the waves. Rookie mistake number 1, boys. Only touristy beachgoers pick up the trash. Though, considering the business attire of the lumped figure sinking into the sand, one could be forgiving for assuming that the nearest resort wasn't 35 miles away. Kelly knelt by the body. Rookie mistake number 2, they thought, licking their thumb and rubbing the victim's neck. And the nail in your forensic coffin? Makeup doesn't change its color in conjunction with the skin. With a bit of fuss, the pancake came away, revealing 2 bite marks. Further investigation revealed a series of extra wounds around the body, wounds which even a $1,000 suit couldn't cover up. Too bad he's clearly drained, they muttered, sighing. No blood means no blood to corrupt with the curse, means no undeath, means no kill for me to rack up, they said, reaching a hand into the man's pockets. Kelly unhooked a device from their belt hoop. Technologically, it was the doppelganger of a flashlight, cylindrical, equipped with a bulb, blemished by a switch. However, this switch had 3 settings, and there appeared to be a dial of sorts on the base of the device, a dial inlaid with runes. Slipping the switch into its northernmost slot, Kelly shined a light on the corpse. Nothing in the pockets. Must be a miserly bloodsucker what we got this one. Kelly stood up, sighing again. Jesus, Jack the Ripper, Christ, they whined, craning their neck for a few seconds. Guess I'll have to go scavenging tonight. Rat bastards. With that, and continuing to illuminate the ground in front of them, Kelly proceeded up the beach, following the cleared sand. Kelly's left hand returned to those cargo shorts, came back with a phone. Come on, they mumbled into the receiver. Pick up already, boss. Which eventually he did. It's 11:10, Kelly. I'm trying to sleep. Oh, what, you think it's brillig where I am? I got a report and you know it. Very well, Jerry yawned. Make it quick. Vampire's kiss like we suspected? Vampire's third base, more like. The bloodsucker left nary a drop in the system. Clearly wasn't looking for a thrall. Jerry yawned again. Antisocial vamp, eh? You never see those anymore. I'm not sure about that, boss. There's no sign of any vehicle, and the Vic's clearly not a local boy. I'm pretty sure the vamp cozied up to his target somewhere else and then dragged the body down to shore. All the same, a vampire thinks he can tackle the world by his lonesome without enthralling anybody. That's a vampire whose power would give Napoleon a hard-on. Want me to send someone your way? Honestly, Kelly said, escaping into the grass and walking past their parked Vespa, I'm willing to take the risk that it's just a small fry who's seen too many cop dramas. The bloodsucker du jour might be new to the game, and if he is and simply doesn't know the vampire ropes, I'd rather neutralize him first chance I get. Fair enough, Jerry yawned. Oh, by the by, your esteemed colleague texted me earlier. She's taking leave next month, meaning the Kelpie rumors around the Great Lakes are yours to deal with. Oh, really? And is she aware that I had plans to take next month off? There's no indication that she isn't. She just got to the paperwork first, when we weren't looking. Well, in that case, can you text her back and tell her that she's an inconsiderate shrew and that I know where she lives? Will do, Kelly. Are you sure you don't want any backup on your side of the world? Positive. Besides, you probably just crash and fall asleep before you remember to allocate it. Mid-yawn, Jerry said, Stick it up your dick and call it a corn dog, Kelly. Now, kindly screw off and let me catch some Z's. No codger needs to sleep. Jerry hung up, and Kelly replaced the phone. In its place, they extracted a butterfly knife. Well now, they said, examining the traces that connected the beachfront to the upcoming hills. Looks like our bloodsucker decided to pull a pastoral on me. This ought to be dandy. And next, I'm going to read a poem I wrote. It's possibly the only good poem I've ever written in my life, so enjoy. The Butcher, a twisted poem. The butcher's been to hell, he has, and had a Galway hooker. He carved a marble pig, he did, played a mean game of snooker. The butcher was a brute, he was, a hulking, hungry phantom. He slaughtered all who welcome bid, and drank the blood of all them. The butcher's hut was built with bones, and down the valley rested. He stole it from humility, but claimed he'd terror bested. The butcher sat astride his throne, and laughed his larynx bare. He gorged himself on vanity, and slowly drank despair. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ethan. That was fantastic. So great to hear you read, man. I'm going to introduce Grace Giska. Grace is a writer and outdoor adventure guide from North Carolina. Her work appears in Rattle Magazine, Mad Swivel, Ramifications, Book Fox, her travel blog, Pack a Pen. When she's not writing, Grace prefers to spend her time outside, soaking up the sun and waiting for magical things to happen. Please give it up to Grace Giska.
Hello. Thank you, Dr. Peters. I have a poem and a piece of flash fiction for y'all. I'm going to do the poem first. It's from the chapbook. It's called The Sunset View. Now, I told her not to rush it. The fall would be as natural as death. Her head was too heavy, like a clogged drain, thoughts weighing her down. Her mind cracked before the rest of her. I told her she was out of shape, crawling through days of classes and panicking for each person, remembering the dates but forgetting the days. It should be no surprise she fell. Falling a 10-story sprint, she fell like it was a marathon, swinging limbs, striving to reach the sidewalk in the sky. She was wearing a pink sweater. I told her it didn't go well with crimson, and falling's a pretty girl's sport, and we all look the same dressed in red. It's a shame she forgot her glasses. I told her not to. No one ever comments on a brilliant sunset when they fall from the sky. Awesome. And so now I have a short piece of fiction I'd like to share with y'all that's called Swim Team Chicken, about children acting really cultish about chicken sandwiches that I enjoy a lot. Huddled like a coven in bright beach towels, now soaked and heavy, the children waited. Giggling and shivering, they ran to their parents to ask for snack money. The sounds of their bare feet slapping the ground were stifled by coaches yelling and air horns blaring under yellow streetlights. It was late in the evening, well past typical dinner time. Their bouncing little bodies found each other through the crowds and squeezed into a circle as they showed each other their crumpled dollar bills. They pulled translucent goggles off their raccoon-ringed eyes, then counted out the money they needed for chicken sandwiches. One little boy could picture his sandwich perfectly. The damp bread wrapped around the poultry like a heavy sweater in August. To him, it was the golden goose of survival food. Inside their little coven, the children's eyes smiled bright, and a pact was drawn through sideways glances and elbow pokes. Sandwiches for all. The group broke, their purple-blue lips and chattering teeth, hungry for a bite of warmth on a cool summer night. The boy fell to the back of the pack as they ran over dark, wet pavement. Official whistles blew behind him as the group rushed to an insulated red cooler and the woman behind it who was willing to collect their damp dollar bills and exchange them for sandwiches. The boy heard his brothers from other tribes, school or Boy Scouts or whatever, splashing down the swim lanes as he waited in the chicken line. His 450 felt more valuable than any blue ribbon. The swimmers splashed right up to the edge of the pool alongside him. The fastest overachievers had already spun off the concrete pool walls and were doubling back to the diving blocks. His own crowd wrapped their towels tighter around themselves as they picked out the smells of pickles and peanut oil from the currents of chlorine wafting through the air. The boy with his invaluable 450 hung out on the edge of the group. He was at the cross-section of the chicken line and the splash zone. The swimmers spat water and gasped for air as they pulled themselves from the pool, slowly like slugs. Better yet, slugs with bellies full of stones. But once out of the water, they rushed for their damp towels, blue raspberry and cherry popsicle stains all over them, where their own covens waited. A ribbon-bearing mother chased after one of the still dripping wet swimmers. She freestyled her way through the carnival of laughing, chattering, and shivering bodies to reach her son as he disappeared under a red Superman towel. The boy in the chicken line is pulled closer to the rest of his group to help collectively shield them from the wind. His stomach growls, and it's his turn to ask for chicken and bread and 2 pickles. The exchange is quick, and he gives his paper dollars to the chicken lady. In return, she gives him the swim team special, a moist meal wrapped in its own sweat, the most prestigious melt-in-your-mouth bag of chicken and bread. The red and white wrapper is soon discarded into a trash can full of ribbons. Thank y'all for letting me read.
Thank you so much, Grace. That was fabulous. Our next reader is Lillian Hamman. Who would have thought the freshman girl coming into Berry College from Bremen, Georgia, on a tuba scholarship would end up graduating with a degree in creative writing and business, that she would give tours at the Oak Hill Museum and weave dogwood towels for the Viking Creation Student Enterprise, that she would run over 5,500 miles as a member of the Barry cross country and track teams, that Grace could be real. Lillian Hamman is so grateful for every experience Barry has contributed to her story, and she looks forward to seeing it continue to be told through many more. Please welcome Lillian Hamman.
All right, I'm going to read my fiction piece that I wrote for Dr. Donnelly's class my junior year, Up the Creek, and it's in the chapbook. Fog settled through the rows of trees as his stride slowed to a lumbering stop, cannons rumbling inescapably around him. Trying to compete with the beating of his heart and the weight of his shortened breaths, he stared at his left hand still gripping the metal stock, at the bayonet cradled in the muzzle, at the finger that had never made it to the trigger. He closed his eyes and fought back against the voices that had doubted his fight. Wars for men, they said, wars for the brave. Though these doubts had become truths, he refused to accept the ignorance of his youth, obscuring what he had yet to understand. How were all of these men brave for leaving their lives of expectant crops and wives for this alternative higher calling of death? How was it these brave men could wear life on their sleeve only to take that of another? How could they willingly dip the cradled bayonet into the painted blood of a penetrated life? That this country's freedom of choice could truly be worth the price of the blood he had witnessed at any brave man's age. If he had known what real was like, would he still be pretending? Innocent but forever haunted, his eyes opened through the fog, falling on the holes running away had carved into the creased leather of his boots. Frost crystallized around his toes, and a violet-colored numbness spread under the frozen nail beds. Although he could see his feet, he wished even more to feel them. He wondered if this was what it was like for brave men to look at the stiff bodies after a battle, if they saw them but felt nothing. Was this numbness a consequence for pretending to be brave? A single tear caught the whisper of his thoughts and traced along the curve of his cheek to the corner of his mouth, leaving behind a frigid kiss like the last his mother had sent with him. There had not been a moment like this in the heavy uncertainty of walking into the unknown, in the fear of the fight, in the flight of escape, to elicit crying. Yet here now, in these frozen woods and numb emptiness of impostered manhood, he could feel this tear. The firing of cannons now seemed distant, as his lips where the tear rested craved more of them. He found his hand reaching for the strap of his canteen, raising it to his lips, only to find it dry, numb. The emptier he accepted it, the deeper a craving to be filled became. With the tear's frigid trail still present on his skin, he looked around desperately, ravenously, for any water to fill this empty canteen. Gripping the metal stock of his rifle and forcing his frosted feet into another run, he no longer ran from something he could not understand, but towards something he trusted he could be found. Coming upon the trickling of the creek between the trees, he could no longer feel the kiss of the tear, though the prospect of the water filled him with joy to shed another. Laying the rifle on the ground and taking up the empty canteen, he fell to his knees and bent over the creek, panting in his thirst. He became mesmerized how the water melted around the rocks with effortless power, conforming to every curve in space. Would aiming at the enemy and pulling the trigger require any less energy? He envied the water, that it may have such power and freedom void of bravery's numb consequence to flow where it pleased, over whatever came in its way, free of choice. A numbing shell of frost wrapped his fingers as they trembled into the flowing creek. He watched carefully how each one displaced the water's path, as if they were more rocks that had been set before it, unable to stop it. Slowly he closed his eyes and, cupping his hands together, filled them with this powerful energy. He raised them to his lips, but though he began to drink, the thirst was still there. He could not feel this water from the creek as he had the tear. His eyes opened and looked into the bowl of his hands. The stilled liquid was diluted and red, as only he had seen the brave men of battle carry on their uniforms, not in their canteens. Blood. His stomach turned, and his hands frosted crimson repulsively returned the liquid to the creek. For the first time, he looked up against the current, and his eyes, innocent and haunted, fell on the silent, contorted form, laying as defenseless as the rocks to the water rushing over. The uniform, once enemy or ally, was trivial to nature, for here in the creek there was only the flowing wound of a man once considered brave. He looked over the body, at the frost sparkling on the crooked nails of the fingers and toes. But this time, unlike in the battle from where he had run, though he saw the body and the choice behind it for what it was, Unlike a kiss, unlike a tear, he could not feel it anymore. His posture raised slowly to stand upright, and his eyes away from what lay against the current. Though the firing ammunition and rumbling cannons had never ceased, his thirst now had, for it could no longer be cured. Holding the empty canteen in one crimson frosted hand, he took up his rifle in the other and bravely turned away from the creek towards the thunder of war, finger set to the trigger. And that's it.
That was great. Thanks, Lillian. I remember that story fondly from class. Um, our next reader tonight is Jacqueline Lea. Jacqueline is an animal-loving, romance-writing Savannah girl who has dabbled in poetry and decided she likes it. When she isn't nose deep in reading for her literature courses, she's probably playing with her cat, masterminding some new drama, or cleaning her Jeep. She's currently working as a copywriting intern at a local marketing firm in Rome and hopes to learn more about this niche of writing. Hopefully, she will continue to work there after graduation and eventually get a master's in social media management. So please help me welcome Jacqueline Lea.
Hey, so I'm going to start with a poem. If you have the chat book, it is the first poem for my part. And I'm not going to try to pronounce the name of it, but it's the Hopi term for the Grand Canyon. Where your dusted tissue stretches over the ridges of your nose, elbows, knobby knees, the bones now poke through. Your skin is pulled so taut your bones chip away under the chiseling wind. What man tries to do, slice open your crusted drapery of dermis, shave away your needled follicles, and peek into your bowels, the elements have already done. And yet your secrets are not so easily excised. Your buttressed cliffs of chalky red crags and petrified coyotes to stand guard outside the crumbling crevices, ferocious with their twisting arms and razored spines. Every pebble is a gelded tear as you protect the threshold that is your body. And the next thing I'm going to read is an excerpt from a short story called The Dragon. It is also in the chat book if you want to follow along. Crow wobbles as I lean forward into the horn and swing my stiff leg over the saddle. She sways until I drop my good foot from the stirrup and slide to the ground. The dismount comes like an old song to my muscles, a stanza my body has sung one too many times. I loosen the girth and gather the reins between my rough fingers. Leading her to the tavern porch, I slip the leather straps through the porch rails and tie them. Crow kicks restlessly at the dust, crowding her slender hooves. A wind snaps up, ushering the cloud of deadened earth through the tavern's open door. Boisterous laughter resists the powdery whirl. My stomach churns as the hairs on my neck stiffen to attention. With a final pat to Crow's tangled mane, I loose the two skinned squirrels dangling from the saddle and lurch up the tavern steps. The knee on my bad leg throbs. One day I won't make it up these stairs. Likely even soon I won't be able to swing my leg over Crow's thinning spine. A little bay stallion tied to the end of the porch whinnies at Crow. My ears shun the tavern din just long enough to hear Crow stamp her foot. The wind lingers, swirling around my jeaned ankles, and I smell wet earth. I smell a coming rain. I smell an end, if only momentarily, to this drought. Oh, here she is, the dragon herself. Several heads swivel from the bar, all men with stubbled cheeks and lingering eyes. I pour my weight into my good leg to flatten my stride. Shifting my weight in this way has become instinct. Though it has been wearing down on the one decently functioning ankle I have learned to normalize myself. My limp bolsters my reputation, but what kind of reputation is worth the fear and unease I inflict? I have learned to make myself as human as possible. I must not look weak, but I must not look like a monster either. I ignore the curious gazes and heft myself onto a bar stool isolated from the other barflies. The pressure on my inflamed joints eases. I exhale a small, relieved breath. The men continue chortling amongst themselves with indiscreet glances my way. Wendy, the Tuesday through Friday barmaid, comes into my space with a sigh. The dragon herself, she mutters with an eye roll. What'll it be tonight, dragon? Just a fifth to take. Got to get the old girl in the barn before the rains. The rains. Have I been locked in here so long I can't see the clouds coming? I shake my head, feeling the thick knot of braid undulate between my shoulders. I smell it. It's going to be one of those that roll in without thunder or darkness. Smell it. Wendy caps the glass bottle and places it on the bar top at my curled fingers. Is that how you got that nickname? You smelled a mean storm coming and warned the cavalry. I'm sure the good old boys could tell you all about my story, I say, risking a glare down the sticky laminate stretch. The squirrels hang by my leg, fluffy tails wrapped around my knuckles, and they feel heavier than just a moment ago. Oh, you know I've asked a dozen times. We always talk about you the second you're out that door. Those fools say something different every time. You can only trust a lady's word around here. She winks and wipes the bar around the cask. So tell me, what earned you such a reputation? And that is going to be all for me. Thank you guys for attending and listening.
Thanks, Jacqueline. That was wonderful. I enjoyed that a lot. It is my turn now to embarrass Shannon Rainey. Shannon Rainey is an award-winning writer and published poet from Madison, Alabama. She has received an Academy of American Poets Award, the Alice Wingo Essay Prize, the Old Leaf Award, and is a nominee for the Association of Writers and Writing Programs Intro Journals Project Poetry Awards. She has work published in Still Point Literary Magazine, Ramifications Art and Literary Magazine, Alabama's Best Emerging Poets, and the Allegheny Review. She has served as editor-in-chief of Ramifications since January of 2020. When not writing, Shannon likes to spend time painting watercolors, crocheting, petting her 3 cats, and napping. So here's Shannon.
Can you see me? My video is not showing up for me. Okay, cool. Yes, so I'm going to start with a poem that my roommate specifically requested I read. This is not in the chat book, this is just my own, but this is a bilingual poem that I wrote in both French and English. You might notice that I use French kind of a lot. But I'm not going to read the French version, I'm just going to read the English one. So since this is in English, this is My Heart of Flowers. In my chest, there is a void where my heart used to be. You plucked it out. In its place, I fill my soul with flowers. I tuck daffodils into my veins. I fill my arteries with sunflowers. I stuff my aorta with daisies. My capillaries are roses. My ventricles are full of violets. I replace my platelets with peonies. I fill myself with every beautiful thing until I bleed nothing but petals. Meanwhile, my heart wilts in a bouquet next to your bed. Okay. And then I haven't really thought through my order, so this is kind of all over the place. The next one I'm going to go for is one that I honestly wrote like this week. It's kind of funny. I couldn't sleep, and this poem came to mind. So as you'll notice, it's titled 2:06 a.m. I find it funny how arrows sounds like arrows, and then I think of a quiver, and how quiver sounds like the shiver I feel when you say my name. And then I think of aim, of aimer, as in to love, as in one who aims for the heart. And then I think of how heart sounds like heart, and deer sounds like deer. And then, my dear, I think of hunting. And I find it funny how when I say je t'aime, you don't hear I aim for you, but I do. You are at the center of my gaze, but I'm no Artemis, I'm the deer with an arrow between my ribs. The next one I'm going to do is actually a sonnet. And this one is kind of inspired by, I don't know, if you've ever been outside at night in the summer, especially up around like Ford at Barry, where we have a lot of like water and stuff, you've probably heard the frogs making lots of noise. And so this is Frog Song. The sun sets, sky darkens, and the frog choir starts to sing to the semi-qua tick, tick of the metronome. Notes rise higher like the frogs wish they could. Their lunatic plans of conquering water, earth, now sky are doomed. The birds laugh at their hopeless song. Who would ever think that a frog could fly? They should stay on the ground where they belong. Owls soar above on their evening patrol, and frogs watch with envy like they could will themselves wings. But these are dreams for tadpoles who have not yet learned what the world is. Yet still, they raise their amphibious voices to croon nighttime songs at an indifferent moon. So I'm going to do the next one. Okay. Pardon my literal French in this one. My pronunciations are not the best, but this is Sur la rue d'Aubigny. This is, I believe, in the chapbook. You set up your easel, took hold of your paintbrush, smeared oil paint on stretched canvas in a furious attempt to mimic elusive nature. The tree roots felt like your brain, twisted, gnarled, topsoil eroded by a lifetime of rainy days. Is yellow ochre a sad color? That summer shade of sun transmutes earth to gold. You saw the alchemy of it, hoped it could change you too. Thick globs of it on your palette, in your brush, on your canvas, in your throat, but it was lead on your lips. The colors were your poison and your cure. Only you could carve tree roots from rainbows. Is cerulean blue a happy color? That wash of sky is enough to drown in. You had nature and art and poetry, mais ça ne suffisait pas. In a field outside Auvers-sur-Oise, you set down your easel, let go of your paintbrush, and never picked them up again. Chromium red spilled on your shirt, burnt sienna stained your hands. I wish I could have told you, la tristesse ne durera pas toujours. Is yellow ochre a sad color? Is there such a thing? And then lastly, I'm going to read another one that uses French. This one is in the chapbook, and it's also in the most recent issue of Ramifications. In our advanced poetry class last semester, Dr. Meek gave us the advice of not using the word heart in romantic poems. And so when we wrote poems in Dr. Peters' class this semester, or when we wrote anything, I tried very hard to do that. So you'll notice the only use of the word heart is in the title. This is Cri du Coeur. Every great romantic poet contemplated the sublime, wishing to capture that which is uncapturable. Beauty and terror to inspire great admiration, to inspire faith in a creator. Wordsworth wrote, "It takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility." Shelley and Byron focused on the terror and ecstasy in nature. Coleridge considered only a few things sublime. The boundless sea and sky are two. To him, sublime meant infinity. I define it differently. It is not craggy, ice-covered granite peaks, or endless fields of aster and gentian and bellflower, or thunderous rivers that tumble and roar down mountainsides, or birds singing obeids with the rising sun, or the roiling green of a raging sea. It is the alpenglow that warms your cheeks, your ephemeral smile and rain-washed skin, your bitter chocolate eyes that make me melt like a spontaneous Easter snow. It's époustouflant, the after-green fog settling on the hills around us, leaving us marooned in our own supernal world. It is the terror, the dread of having your spirit parted from mine, la douleur exquise of wanting. I believe in God when I am with you. And that's all for me.
That was really great, Shannon. Thank you. Our next reader is Shelby Stuebner, a creative writing major at Barry. Shelby Stuebner has loved stories for as long as she can remember. Ever since reading Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time, she knew that one day she wanted to create and share stories of her own, to make characters, worlds, and schemes come to life like a kind of wondrous magic. Through her time at Barry, she has undertaken the mission to write a novel of her own and plans to continue that pursuit after graduation, as well as devote her time to the book and publishing industry. She intends to one day create and share her storytelling dreams with the world. Please welcome Shelby Stuebner.
So I will be reading an excerpt from a historical fiction piece called Arena of Will and Steel. He could feel the ground vibrating, all the way from the arena to where he stood, chained in Hypogeum's cell, waiting for his own entrance to the sanded bestial stage. Alexander clamped his hands tight enough for riddled veins to protrude from thick muscle. The ice-cold stones surrounding his cell, touching his back from the wall and the slab on which he was seated, brought him to stand. Blood flowed hotly through his veins as he paced, melting the goose flesh from his skin and warming Alexander's muscles to easy movement. He was going to need full confidence in both body and mind if he was soon to enter the Colosseum. Fortunately, he'd never had cause to doubt his ability. A gladiator volunteer, he'd known precisely the risk, and he'd gambled all the same. Alexander chuckled, trying to ease some tension from his shoulders. His thoughts reminded him with morbid sarcasm. At least the price was good. His wife Cassia would be able to live comfortably for a while. His gambling debts were paid, and what money he did earn after a fight, from whatever scraps Flavian gave him, Alexander sent her way. The price, of course, was a gladiator's contracted oath, Uri vincere, reberari, feroque, necari, patior. I will endure to be burned, to be bound, to be beaten, and to be killed by the sword. With that, he had forsaken any right toward free will, and his actions were alone to serve in life and death as a gladiator. He was bound to ask nothing of the gods in return for the life he no longer owned. Alexander closed his eyes and prayed to Pluto, who was the god every gladiator was bound to meet at the end. The Romans would send out a man disguised in his image after every killing, to beat the fallen and ensure the verity of his death. That was a scene no gladiator would cease to forget or fear. Alexander prayed to the god of the underworld for stall striking his mallet this day, at least until he had a chance to see Cassia again, one last time before it fell. Keys rattled at the door to his cell and swept wide to reveal his sponsor, Flavian. Wide in girth and greeting him with that familiar, irritated frown, the short man peered like a tan sun from the elaborately layered folds of his white toga. A single signet ring shimmered gold as he moved to unlock Alexander's chains, and showed his self-made crest, a pomegranate with a gladius piercing down straight through. Once a gladiator himself, Flavian knew well the Roman god Pluto. He designed the ring and developed a taste for the underworld's fruit, almost in spite of him. The games will be different this time, Alexander, Flavius remarked, and gestured for his charge to follow him out of his cell. Emperor Titus has ordered 3,000 men to be delivered into this spectacle. Most of them are criminals, men easily disposed of, so I suspect that the emperor has a mock battle of sorts in mind. You should be able to survive them with your skills easily enough. I think this investment should earn you plenty glory, and you might even succeed in finding a Rudis at the end of it. But if not, I do think, he sniffed reluctantly, a cut of the profit might meet your return. He raised a finger. If you survive, that is. Mind that you do. Do I ever disappoint you, Flavian? The sponsor gave a huff and narrowed his gaze at Alexander, as if to say, no, but you better pray to the gods it does not happen any time soon. Alexander followed Flavian through the Hypogeum halls, striding past caged gladiators, criminals, lions, horses, and other beasts. Picking up his heels, Alexander stretched his muscles in various jogs and quick jumps, as an archer would test a bowstring before strapping on an arrowed weapon. The armory adorned him with the guise of his role, a Murmilla's helmet, visored with a high crest and engraved with the relief of Hercules poised in battle. A red feathering scored across the top. Am I to be Athenian then? He could only hope that this time he was enacting one of their victories. Alexander strapped to his left arm a long rectangular shield, one that required only the necessity of a shin guard to protect his open leg beneath. In his right, the gladius short sword, preferred weapon of the Romans, was held comfortably in his grip. One last look at Flavian showed a grim expression with signet ringed fist slammed over his heart. Alexander gave a returning, cool nod and felt the reality of the situation dawn on him fully, like a shroud of fallen shadow. And that is all for me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Shelby. I remember that story well myself. It's a great one. Next, we have our final reader of the evening, after which we'll all kind of come back together on the screen. But for now, this is Nathanael Williams. Nathanael Williams, also known during his time at Barry as Nat, Nate, and Natty Light, like the beer, was for the first time in his life surrounded by his people. Here were others with a passion for world building, story crafting, and unleashing their imagination upon the page. Thus reinforced, he struck out on the 4-year road to a bachelor's in good company, and from this first summit, he peers onward towards goals greater still. His destination, though still years distance, is to be like the men and women who taught him how to get to this point, to become a professor of creative writing, to awaken in others the same love for stories and storytelling that was awoken in him. It's a great bio, Nathanael. So please help me welcome Nathanael Williams.
Alrighty, everything seems to be functioning. All right, so thank you so much, Dr. Donnelly, and I've got 3 pieces for you tonight. One of them, I was told that it was one of the best pieces I've ever written at Barry, but it is heckin' depressing. So I'm gonna start with that one, so we get it out of the way and we can end with some more upbeat stuff. So the first one is an excerpt from a story of mine called Guillotine, and you'll find it on the very last page of the chapbook if you have that, and I'm going to be reading a little bit more just to give it the context. And so I'm just going to give you a heads up. Excuse my French. There is some nasty name calling in this, but it is part of the universe. And so I apologize for that, but here we go. I got my name the day I took a life, the first of many. Oi, the slaver said, rattling the rusty bars of the cage, a fat, dirty finger stabbing through the rank air in my direction. You, blue girlie, you're up. It was drizzling that day, the tiny droplets full of ash and leaving sooty streaks on the corrugated roofs and ramshackle hovels of Bludgeonburg. But that wasn't about to put a dent in the profits of pit fighting. The other kids shrank away from me as far as the cage would allow, as if just being in the periphery of that filthy finger and its point of contention was a death sentence, and sometimes it was. If I'd had a name before, I'd forgotten it, and it didn't matter, because what good is there in naming livestock? No, teens and adults got the brand, and us kids, well, the slavers dyed our hair, and mine, an unruly, short-cropped mess, none too different from what it is now, had been dyed blue. Blood and bone, mud and stone. The roars of raiders and rejects, the refuse of the wastes, pounding their approval into the rotten wood and scrap metal of the bleachers echoed down into the holding pens, filling my ears with promises of pain. Only Auntie Chip stayed where she was, and as I curled up tighter in the ooze and slime that made lukewarm by my meager body heat, she scooched forward, sending ripples through the mire that lapped against my back. Listen closely, little one, she said softly, pulling me into a sort of half-hug between herself and the soggy ground. You're going to be okay. Just keep moving and look for an opening. The bully likes to use a sledgehammer, so if you're quick, you can. Enough fawning, shelter slut, the slaver snarled, giving the cage a savage kick. If you love them kids so much, I might just drag you out and give you one of your own. Auntie Chip ignored him, keeping her gray eyes on mine as the slaver made several crude gestures and began fumbling with the keys. I'll never forget those gray eyes of hers. Be strong, be brave, and whatever you do, don't stop moving. I didn't want to get up. I knew what had happened to Pink, the boy who'd been sent out before me. I'd heard the sharp, wet crunch of his skull getting stoved in on the other side of the bleachers. Blood and bone, mud and stone. As I slowly uncurled, all I could manage was a slight nod before I buried my face in her chest. I didn't want to cry neither, but the tears came anyway, soaking into the soiled green and gold fabric of her shelter barding. Shh, none of that now, she admonished, drying my tears with a dirt-stained thumb. Even though she couldn't have been a day over 16, Auntie Chip was the oldest in a cage full of kids that, well, I'd hazard we were between the ages of 8 and 12. That's why, at least to us, she was a guardian figure worthy of the title Auntie. Damn fucking keys, the slaver said, still fumbling away. Of course I gotta take a piss when I'm trying to do something finicky. The name Chip was also one we kids gave her. It came from the busted friend chip embedded in her left temple, one of those fancy biocomputers that marked her out as a Shelby, someone who'd been born before the Great Mad War. Blood and bone, mud and stone. It meant she would fetch a far better price than us wasteland rats, being a pure unblemished stock and all. That's why she hadn't been sent to the pits and was left to look after us. So, now that we have that out of the way, let me get on to one of my more fun pieces. This is a poem that I wrote for one of my poetry classes. It's a short little thing, but I enjoyed doing it. And well, I always try to tie stuff into my world building. So this is from a completely separate universe where things are decidedly a lot more happy than what poor Guillotine has to deal with. So this is called the pilot song. Twist and whirl, spin and twirl, fly by the tips of your wings. But when you come down, fear not the ground, for it's the place from whence you came. So remember that place in that wide blue space, and don't lose yourself to the sun. For family and friends, pray you return once again by the tips of your wings, not in flames. And finally, I will be reading another short fiction piece of mine called The Giant well, not the full thing, but it's an excerpt from a piece called The Giant of the Asphalt Way. And it's also got a little bit of poetry in it. I like to include little bits of, I guess you could say, like prophecy or whatnot, but here we go. How did you know to look for me? Fernbell manages, a wave of weariness washing over her as the adrenaline drains away. The mother that grants all magic, from the simplest trick to the greatest miracle of life, told me to be on the lookout for one who wields a blade by the wayside. The Animother spoke to it. Fernbell feels her perceptions about the powers that be in her world slipping away with her consciousness. And I believe this is yours, the giant says, stooping down to offer Fernbell her falchion, the blade looking like a dagger in the creature's palm. As Fernbell reaches out to take her sword, another wave of exhaustion, this one stronger than the last, washes over her worn and wounded body. She wavers for a second before falling back into the mud, fighting and failing to keep her eyes open. The last thing she sees are several strange golden tendrils of light that seem to emanate from the giant's hand and surround the falchion. And the last thing she hears is a deep, elderly, feminine voice chanting softly in the night. By the power of the All-Mother vested in me, I ask to impart this blessing for free. Not to be squandered or used for ill will, not to be used in unchecked anger to kill. Rather, bless this blade with the power to mend, to cleave lost souls from dead bodies, and to the eternal plains send. To undo the curse of necrite in the land, to deliver the defenseless when war is at hand. I ask that this blade bring peace and end strife. Now I return it to you, young defender of life. The giant looks up from her enchantment to find Fernbell fast asleep, the trials of the past 2 days having finally caught up with the young rabbit. Hidden beneath the hood of her well-worn ghillie suit and behind a pair of night vision goggles fragile with age, a small smile creases the wrinkles of the giant's wizened face as she rewraps the falchion in its discarded oilcloth and places it on Fernbell's chest before gently scooping her up. You've done much, young'un, more than anyone should have to do at your age, but the road ahead of you is a long one, and it's the least I can do to speed your passage. With 3 great strides, the giant is back on the asphalt way, the crumbling blacktop from a bygone era cutting southeast to west across the dismal gray of the charred marches. With the harlequin-furred rabbit in her arms, one of the last humans on Earth ambles silently into the night, following the ancient roadway. The next morning, Fernbell awakes in a hollow, hidden in an eroded embankment by the roadside with her father's sword in her arms, a bundle of hardtack biscuits, and a little metal compass. The events of the night seem like a dream to her, only leaving half-remembered images bobbing to the surface as she rubs her eyes in the soft gray morning light. Yet she will never truly forget her encounter with the legendary survivor of the giant wars, the one who wanders the asphalt way in the depths of the night, a creature of magic, seeking those in need of help and atoning for the sins of its kind, one blessing at a time. And that is all from me.
Great work, Nathaniel. I'm sorry, I think I came on too soon. Dr. Meek, you want to take over from here?
No, that was fabulous, Nathaniel. I think we can all come back on and just say congratulations to everybody. I think we get to have 1 or 2 of you for another semester, but many of you are leaving us at this time. So I think Dr. Peters wants to say something, but I just want to say, please, y'all, keep in touch. We wanna know what's going on with y'all.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you guys so much. That was amazing. You guys are amazing. That was really great writing. It was great to see so many of you reading things from our last class together. That was really neat to see that sort of come to fruition. I hope you've enjoyed your experience at Barry and with creative writing. I don't think the three of us are planning to go anywhere anytime soon. So you're welcome to come visit. Please, actually, come visit. It's going to be more fun if you do. And we're easy to find. Obviously, email, internet. Dr. Donnelly has a very dedicated online presence. I wish I was as cool as he was. Maybe one day. But now you guys can be friends and not just students, right? So that's cool. I hope if you want us to be your friends, if you don't, that's fine. I'll understand. I won't cry too much. But yeah, it's been great. You guys really are great. I mean that sincerely. I hope you know that. This has been such a pleasure to have you guys. And I've been here long enough that I've been able to have, I think, all of you multiple times in my classes. So I felt like I've gotten to know you all pretty well. And I am sad to see you go. I know you want to go and you're ready to go. But just remember who you're leaving behind. Okay, I'm just kidding. But thank you guys really so much, and thanks for just being awesome. And thank you all for those of you who are in attendance and are watching. Thank you so much for attending, and I hope you enjoyed the show.